Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Chastity Pratt-Dawsey, sitting in for Stephen Henderson. My first guest was one of the most well-known faces in Detroit television news for nearly 30 years. Al Allen was a fixture on Fox 2's morning show before retiring in 2012. Now he's written a memoir titled We're Standing By. In the book, Al shares details on stories he covered, from crime and scandals to celebrations and snowstorms. He also discusses his family life and passion for mentoring African-American journalists. It's a pleasure to welcome Al Allen to American Black Journal.
Chastity, thank you so much, and I'm so glad to be here. It's nice to visit places and get known on television all over again. You know, it's 5 years ago I retired, but now people say, oh, he's still alive. He's still around here. So yes.
Cut it out, Al Allen. I have seen you around town, in the crowded places, in Target. You are still everywhere.
Oh yes, yes indeed.
But you know what? I think a lot of people remember you as that guy who was covering the snowstorms on the overpass, the rain, the snow, the sleet, and all that, right?
Chastity, you know what? Out of all the stories I've done, and it's been thousands over the years, viewers remember that one story. That old man out there in that snow, in that rain, in those high winds, and they would say, why'd they put him out there? Put some of those young people out there.
Right. I know it.
What became famous, I guess.
But you know what? I want you to talk about this book, We're Standing By. But first, really, give people who don't know your biography, a brief synopsis, where you were born, and talk about the history that was happening around you when you were a child.
You know, as I've said this in the book too as well, I was always at the right place at the wrong time instead of the other way around.
Right.
I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I lived across the street from what they were called the Little Rock Nine. These were the first black students to integrate then Central High School in Little Rock. The one lead was the oldest one. He was a senior, Ernest Green. Mm-hmm. He lived across the street from us. So I would see the Jeeps, the tanks, the trucks to pull up and make sure they got to Central High School. His mother was my 4th grade teacher. And I also witnessed on a bus, my mother and I were going downtown, mm-hmm. and there was this black guy, and he was sitting next to, I guess he was his girlfriend. He was dark-skinned, but she was very fair complexion, but she was black. Mm-hmm. At that time, 3 white teenagers got on the bus and looked back there, because we sat in the bus, and says, what you doing with that white girl? And he said, and she said, I'm black, I'm colored at that time, I'm not white, you know. They didn't believe him. They proceeded to go back there, and they beat that guy so bad, they beat him from the back of the bus, off the bus, out onto the street. And there are other things that I've witnessed before, just being at the right place, but at the wrong time. So segregation, I knew about, I lived it. It was an ugly part of the United States history of what those students went through. And there have been other things too as well. So as Karen Dumas would say, you know, Al, you got a lot to talk about.
Right.
I said, no, I don't have nothing to do. They said, yes, you do.
But see, this is history. This isn't just stuff happening. Little Rock 9, right there across the street from you. When I was reading through the book, I found it interesting where you talked about as a teenager or as a young child seeing a teenager get shot.
Yes.
And running to it as opposed to away from it. Was that the news hound already developing in you?
It was. You know, we lived in public housing in Little Rock at that time. We were outside playing, and we saw these. They were older than we were, and they were just maybe 15, 20 feet away from us. They got into whatever. And all of a sudden, this kid pulls out a gun, and the other kid starts running, and he shoots him. Well, we're there. My friend's running out of the way. I'm running to the way to see what's going on. I had this habit of just always wanting to know what is going on. My grandmother says that Doris told my mother, that boy is going to be a lawyer or a politician because he lies a lot. Instead, I became a journalist.
Now, see, you know what I'm saying? We lie a lot. Now, what you trying to say, Al Allen? So at some point, you moved to Detroit and graduate from Mumford High School.
Yes, Cass Tech alumni. Yes, I did.
Okay, Mumford alumni. But back then, you got into radio.
Yes.
Before TV. A lot of people don't understand you weren't always the guy on Fox 2 in the morning on TV. Talk about how you went into radio first and what you did there, how you made the transition
You know,
to television?
I tell interns this, and you know this industry that we're in, because you were in print and I was in broadcast. It is not easy. You knock on the door, ring the doorbell, or pick up a phone. No, they're not concerned about you. We're not hiring today. You don't have any experience. So I did. I got my start in radio. Little Rock, Arkansas at KOKY was my first radio station. I was the news director. I mopped floors. I washed windows and was on the air too as well. I worked with a guy.
Wait. You cleaned up and
Oh yes, you did everything. You know, you getting your start. And I worked with a guy named Jocko Smith.
Okay.
He was nationally known because he coined the phrase soul music as dirty, filthy black music. And everybody said it. And you know, that's what he coined as soul music.
Wow.
So I worked with some of those. I worked at WGPR in Detroit. We came to Detroit, I worked at GPR. And I worked at JLB twice.
When it was AM.
When it was AM. Oh, don't talk about that. We laughed when they said we're going to switch from AM to FM. And we said, FM, that's not going to work. Nobody's going to listen. Well, we were wrong, you know. But I was the news director at JLB. And one of the things I had, Chastity, and it's always been a passion of me, black people not only sing and dance, they need to be informed. So I took that news department. It was a two-person rip and read. That's what you do, rip it off the wire and read it. And I turned it into a 6.5-person news department that became award-winning news department.
Well, wait, slow down. You say award-winning. You have to mention to people. I don't want to give away all the good stuff from the book.
Okay.
But this right here stood out to me. You worked on a documentary about Hoffa's friend who was killed around the same time. It's not just Jimmy Hoffa that turned up dead.
It was the first, and so far I think the only inquest in the history of the state of Michigan. Otto Wendell was the Secretary of Treasury for them. He was leaving. He lived in Pinckney. He was driving out of his road there, going to work. Somebody shot and killed him. Okay, 6-7 months earlier, Jimmy Hoffa had been killed. Wow. So these were close friends. All right, and they told me, I started doing the story. Al, be careful. You're going up to Pinckney and Howell. That's Ku Klux Klan territory. Well, as it turned out, nobody ever bothered me. I became friends with the prosecutor, as a matter of fact, who was Hispanic. And we had a good time. And I turned all I had done into a documentary. That was my first award-winning documentary. I had never done a documentary before. And now my appetite, I can do this. And people have known me. I've tried things. It's crazy. Kathy Young Welch was my assistant news director at JLB, and she said, you can't do that. I said, yes, we can. And we did. And we became an award-winning news department as a result. Because, like I said, in my mind, I guess I'm biased, prejudiced. Everybody needs to know what their neighbors are doing next door.
Well,
and I made sure they knew that.
Highlights in this book. You talk about having a Christmas party, inviting Coleman A. Young. He gets there, ain't no liquor. He says some cuss words. Then, you know, you got to read the rest of the book to see what happens then. But, I mean, it's great. The people in here, Coleman A. Young, Conyers, Damon Keefe, Butch Jones, Hearns, Mahorn, Aretha Franklin, it goes on and on, James Brown, The Who, The Riot. I mean, you talk about a lot of things you were able to do. Is there anyone or anything you wanted to be a part of that you didn't or wish you still could?
You know, it's two things, and it's in the book, and I kind of brush over it. After winning the journalism award, the Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Award for Crime by Color, I got to call from CBS radio. They offered me a job as a weekend anchor and weekday reporter. This is network.
Right.
Told my wife, she said, I'm not leaving. I want to stay here. So I turned it down. Oh, it gets worse. Several months later, NBC radio network calls. And I said the same thing again, and she said the same thing again. I had to turn it down. And
they couldn't have our Detroit's Al Allen.
I know, I guess so. You know, and NBC sent me this news director. It was a nice letter, but he says, in essence, nobody turns down NBC for a job. I praise you for what you did.
So what, 30 years here on TV?
Yeah,
in Detroit?
Well, it was almost 50 years altogether.
Almost 50 years. I tell you, I read the book and I thank you for it. We're standing by as a lesson in Detroit history and journalism, and thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Oh,
Everybody
Chastity,
has to read it.
It's a joy. And the biggest complaint I have, Al, it's not long enough. You got to have more. So you never
It's
know.
just right. It's just right.
So
Thanks,
thank
Al.
you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.